April has not only brought some longer evening, but there have also been some new tech launches from the likes of Campagnolo and Hunt. We also saw some hilarious April Fool's content, and I want to start with one that Trek put out there because they did something quite cool. They launched a pseudo denim Madone, and they said, introducing Carpe Denim, an all-new finish available exclusively to Project One. And I think it looks quite cool. I mean, obviously it's not possible. You could never put that much epoxy into some denim, but I think when you look at the pictures, it does look pretty sick.
It's pretty cool, isn't it? I think as much as this is obviously an April Fool's joke, I think potentially maybe it's Trek putting out a little bit of a feeler. Could this be a future Project One paint job? I'd love to see that. Personally, I think it's really cool.
Well, exactly. Do that as a paint job and then do the saddle, because you could do the saddle in denim. How cool would you look? That'd be amazing. I also like that in the caption as well, they put some care instructions. Hand wash in the tears of the less fashionable riders, tumble dry low. But that wasn't everything that we saw, because there was another one. There was another good one that we saw.
There was indeed. So Precision Fuel and Hydration, who sponsor Lotto Destiny, also jumped on the bandwagon. They said that they came up with a collaboration with Victor Campanarts for a more aerodynamic way to dispense electrolyte tablets. Yes, that's right. It was a sort of Pez dispenser, if you've seen those sweets back in the day, that clips onto the frame, also said to double as an aerodynamic fairing.
Yeah, it was quite good, that one.
Yeah, good. I think a little bit easier to see through than the Project One paint job, you know.
That's true. I mean, for a second, that Trek paint job, I was like, really? But then I'm a simpleton, so that was also why. But, I mean, away from April Fool's content, I did also see a video on Instagram from, I think, potentially the Dubai police, because they have now got this range of, they've got a fleet of new bikes, custom painted Colnago V3 RSs. Very cool, and it's nice as well because they match the paint schemes of like all their police cars, obviously, as they would, because they're also quite famous for having a load of supercars within their police fleet as well. It makes me wonder though, like what they're going to be using these bikes for, like who are they chasing down? And also surprised that they're just V3 RSs. You'd think for the Dubai police, why not go for the V4s?
A little bit outdated. Also, I want to know what kit they're riding, because you can have a V3 RS, but you're not going to catch someone on a specialised alley if you haven't got a skin suit on. So, Dubai Police Department, do you have custom skin suits for your patrolling duties?
Indeed, it's a very good question. But on to something a little bit more serious, because we did see one more thing which looked pretty cool. Was off the back of the Tour of Flanders last weekend, we saw from Escape Collective on their Instagram that Ronan McLaughlin made an incredible spot of some Goodyear tyres, which supposedly cost $650 with a 30-day lead time. Now we can kind of deduce that that is because due to UCI rules, those tyres need to be commercially available. But when you look at the tread pattern, they've got quite an interesting one, because the shoulders of the tyres have got quite a fine tread pattern, kind of lots of very packed together ridges. And then the centre of the tread is a lot more kind of similar to other Goodyear tyres. I mean, that's all the information that we have is just what we've seen. So I think it's going to be interesting to see like what the casing's like, what the TPI's like what the compound's like, why are they so special?
For sure. I think we can probably deduce that they're a classic special tyre.
Yeah.
You know, lightly designed with that extra grip. So many of the crashes we see in the cobbled classics is somebody washing out on a bend. So maybe just to have a touch more grip on the sort of off-camber corners makes sense. But as you say, in terms of casing, for example, if they've got any added puncture protection for the likes of Paris-Roubaix, remains to be seen. But $650, quite the price tag, isn't it?
Well, exactly. I mean, you don't know whether or not, again, it's just a prototype, and if maybe these tyres could potentially be a lot more affordable later down the line. But moving on, there was big news, as mentioned, from Campagnolo. They have finally released their power meter.
Been a long time coming, this one, hasn't it?
Well, exactly. So when Super Record was launched last year now, I was on the launch for that product, and they kind of teased it a little bit, but they were still pretty tight-lipped. What was interesting is that when you looked at the non-drive side crank arm, there was kind of a little cover, and you kind of wondered, well, is that going to be for a future power meter? Turns out it wasn't, because the power meter itself sits on the drive side and kind of looks like a Quark power meter of yesteryear. But now that we've actually seen some numbers, it does sound kind of interesting. So Campagnolo are claiming a ±1% accuracy. It's available in lengths 170 to 172.5 to 175. The construction is a hollow carbon crankset with a titanium axle. We've got a claimed weight of 656 grams, and that is for a 172.5 crank arm length with 2945 chain rings. When I saw that weight, I did have to double check to see how that compared to Red and Dura-Race, because obviously those are the closest competitors. Dura-Race ranges between 685 grams and 696 grams, so a little bit heavier. Red comes in at around 570 grams, but that's for a 175mm crank arm and 4835 chain rings. So clearly SRAM is leading the way here. And I think it's also worth mentioning that comparative weights are actually quite hard to do with chain sets because everyone has their own ethos on gearing, and then obviously different size chain rings play into that. But that being said, back to the Campag Powermeter, it's got a rechargeable and serviceable battery, which is nice. Again, that just makes it a little bit more user-friendly. And then it's got a magnetic cable, which looks to attach at the outside face of the outer chainring. And it uses the same charger as the Super Record wireless group set as well. So it's just nice that there's actually been a bit of integration there, nice bit of forethought there. Runtime on that battery is said to be 5 weeks on a single charge, and that assumes a 500-kilometer riding week at 20 degrees C. I mean, it looks pretty cool. It looks nice. It's good that it's finally landed. I guess the sad thing is that this will be an extra cost to the already existing Super Record wireless group set, which is already very expensive.
Not cheap, is it?
I couldn't see a price, but if we can get hold of one, we'll flash it up on screen for you now. On the surface, it looks good. The numbers do look good. It's a shame that there's not more crank lengths available, say a 165, but I think until we can get our hands on a unit and test it, I think we'll reserve judgment. But I think the key things that we'll be looking for are, one, how accurate really is it? And then also, how well does it actually integrate with the My Campy app? Because that's something that Campagnolo put a lot of time into creating, was this new interface to control your group set and kind of other peripheries. So yeah, it looks good, but I think let's wait and see how it actually performs in the real world.
2024 seemingly has been the year of wheel releases. We've covered countless in the last sort of few months, and there's another one, but this one is really quite interesting. So it's from Hunt, isn't it, Sam?
Yeah.
They brought out their sub 50 limitless Aero wheels a few weeks ago. That was their real top of the range, cutting edge technology. These are much more at the budget end. What can you tell us about them?
Well, I think there's a lot to go through here, and we will get onto the price in a second, but just to run through again some of those headline specs. The range is called the Carbon Disc range, which was formerly known as the Carbon Aero Disc range. So this is a refresh on kind of a bit of a fan favourite actually. Specs on those, you've got a 22mm internal width, which is compatible for tyres from 25mm all the way up to 50mm, so really versatile there. You've got a 30mm wide external width. You do have a fairly basic 36 to 10 degree engagement free hub, but again, at this level, I think that's actually perfectly fine and it will work absolutely perfectly well. You've got triple butted spokes. They come in 3 different depths, 30, 40 and 50 millimeters, and the weights go from 1,408 grams to 1,433 grams to 1,464 grams. Now, I don't think those are bad jumps when you consider that that is going 10mm deeper every single time. So I think for a nice entry-level wheel upgrade, I think these stand to be a really solid and functional purchase. And just to get onto those prices, for the 30mm, in pounds, you'd be paying £779 or $979 or euros. That's kind of in that territory of, I want to upgrade my wheels from what's stock on the bike, and I think these would perform really well for a pretty decent price.
For sure. I think the other thing there to remember is that so many wheels now are really in that price bracket, well above £3,000, $3,000. And the reality is, obviously we don't know till we test these, but the reality is for, you know, someone that wants to go and do their chain gang, go and do some club rides, this is probably a high percentage of that performance for a low percentage of that cost. So what are we actually missing? Well, carbon spokes for one thing.
Yeah.
The internal rim width is ever so slightly narrower than their sort of
top-end
line wheels. And also it's worth mentioning they're hooked rims as well, not hookless.
Yeah, well, but I think a lot of people would actually see that as a huge benefit over hookless. So
definitely for some, after they've been in the spotlight for so long these last few weeks, maybe just some more stress-free riding. The other thing there as well, the engagement of that free hub, Yes, it's slightly less. Again, will you particularly notice it? Probably not. Will it perform just fine? Almost certainly. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think actually, when considering how much more you'd have to spend to get a lot of those features, you're going to be at 2-3 times the cost, but the performance isn't going to be that much greater in the real world. So if you're running some stock wheels and you want to be a bit quicker, enjoy the benefits that some kind of deep section wheels can bring you, I think these are a really good option.
Now for something a little bit more innovative from Body Rocket. So they're a company that is creating the world's first and only real-time aerodynamic drag force measurement system. That's quite a mouthful. What is it? Essentially, they've got force sensors on all the contact points on the bike, so one on the stem, one on the saddle. That is coupled with an out-front airspeed sensor. And by knowing the parameters of the airspeed, along with the force in which that is applied to the rider by the resistance of the air, they can work out a CDA number from that. Now, the bike you're seeing on screen is, of course, a road bike. Though this was developed initially for that sort of time trial setting, the athlete that Body Rocket is now working with, Christian Blumenfeld, is an Olympic triathlete. And of course, they use road bikes in their competitions. So that is why the new system is on his Giant Propel, so he can enjoy many hours of aero training, which to me seems like a tricky sentence to say with a straight face. But
yeah, I mean, it sounds like it'd be pretty painful. Well, I mean, it'd have a rock solid core.
Yes, absolutely.
So I'm sure we can hold that position. I mean, what are the benefits of this really over and above other ways of testing your aero drag?
So there's two main factors here, cost and time. First of all, aero testing, particularly in a wind tunnel setting, is stupidly expensive still. You know, you can be talking £1,000, $1,000 an hour for once by the time you've hired an engineer, hired the facilities. And the other thing is time. We did some aero testing in a video which will be coming up pretty soon in the next few weeks. We were only in there for 2 hours, and if you're really trying to train a position, it's hard to get a feel for that position in just a 2-hour slot, when really, even if you just move, you know, any tiny movement of your head or shoulders is going to cause a massive difference. So being able to train with those numbers in front of you is a real big benefit.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is also really interesting when it comes to just the sheer amount of data that you could collect. It's that constant feedback loop, essentially. And it's essentially, if something's telling you, you know, keep your elbows in, keep your shoulders in all the time, and you can see yourself get faster, I think that probably just trains your mind to always be so aware of every single position that you should or should not be in.
For sure, and I think it gives you the ability, crucially, to fail fast, doesn't
Yes.
it? You know, you can really, as Sam said, you can just collect loads of data and you can work specifically on a position. So it might be that, take Thomas de Gendt, for example, if he has one of these and he can train his breakaway efforts in a position that, as we found out, depending on optimization, can be a lot of watts faster at the speeds of racing, you know, that could be a really worthwhile investment for someone to be actually able to train a specific position for a specific part of a race.
Absolutely. I think there's one more thing just worth touching upon, which is when you look at this bike, it's not something that is going to be adoptable for the masses, but I think the most exciting thing from our point of view, potentially, is over the next 5-10 years, how does this technology get smaller and start to integrate on road bikes in a more commercial way, where you could, say, go and buy a kit, fit it to your bike, and then get that feedback loop directly from your head unit. That, I think, would be really cool. Now, a couple of Tech of the Month episodes ago, you might have seen that we highlighted an amulet that was created by Bastian. And it seems as though we've got something else of a very similar ilk, because Joe, I believe you have taken delivery of a watch.
Indeed, I have taken delivery of one of the new watches that comes as part of the Bravo Team Heritage Collection. Now, why are we talking about watches on Cycling Weekly, you might ask? Well, the Swedish watch brand has actually taken inspiration for the new faces of the watches from cycling. So there's a total of 3 new watches as part of the Team Heritage Collection. The MER, the REN, which is the one on my wrist currently, and the PEU. Now, keen-eyed viewers amongst you, if you like your sort of 50s to 80s cycling, may have noticed that those are actually representative of old iconic team kits. So probably the most recognisable of all is the MER. That throws it back to the Mercier team, which Raymond Pouliador used to ride for. That's Mathieu van der Poel's grandfather. The REN, as I say, this is the one I've got on my wrist. Lovely sort of black and yellow face accents. Quite nice as well that it's sort of 2 levels to the face as well. It's pretty cool. And the Peugeot one, which is probably the most classic of them all, a more sort of monochrome colour palette. All of these have little nods to cycling culture. So we've got like an upside down 13 on the clock face, for example.
That's cool.
There's a Team Heritage logo on the back of the watch face as well. They all come with a Swiss automatic movement, and quite cool as well. Last little nod here is that they come in a Team Heritage handlebar bag. Now this is real leather. First of all, it's the packaging for the watch. The watch comes in this when you take delivery, but it actually can be used as a handlebar bag as well, which I think is quite cool for that vintage aesthetic. Not particularly waterproof, as you can see, it's a leather clamshell design, but for the right day, for the right cafe ride, I think it's pretty cool.
Perfect for, you know, a baguette on a summer's day, perhaps, a very small baguette.
Perhaps, or maybe a gazette. And I must stress, the right day and the right bike as well. Please, let's not go putting this on modern bikes. Steel frames only.
For this month's Bike of the Month, we have the pretty newly released Giant TCR. Now, to give you the rundown on the headlines of this bike, this is the 10th generation of the TCR. It's been around for a fair bit of time now. I think we can all agree though, it looks pretty similar to the previous one. I'd say this is more of a facelift, but there are some quite good differences to be able to spot. You might not be able to spot them, but that's because there's a lot going on underneath the skin. So I'll run you through some numbers as quickly as I can. Like I say, this is the 10th generation frame set. It's claimed to be 10% lighter, 5 watts faster, and a little bit stiffer than the 9th generation. The claimed frame set weight is 690 grams without paint, which is 75 grams less than the previous TCR. There's a key stat though that Giant would actually rather you hear about, which is that this is claimed to be 12 watts faster than the previous, but that is a total system efficiency. So that isn't just the frame, that's all of the bits that are attached to it as well.
So 12 watts faster. Important to note though, as you say, you might not be able to see loads of the changes, but small things like, for example, the cables or hoses have gone integrated at the front. That will make, you know, probably a fair portion of that 12 watt improvement. But still, it looks really smart, doesn't it? And I think they've definitely taken an if it ain't broke, don't fix it approach to the bike.
The release of this bike definitely raises a couple of questions as to how much longer the TCR is actually going to be around for, because I think if we all cast our minds back to when they launched the new Propel, that bike slimmed down a lot, it dropped a lot of weight, and actually the TCR and the Propel now actually sit a lot more closer together. So, for example, the TCR is now only 155 grams lighter and 5 watts slower than the Propel. And actually, when our colleague Stefan was out at the global launch of this bike, he was speaking to one of the global marketing managers, and he said, the question that we are looking for in the next 3 to 5 year plan for both of these products is when do the two combine? So clearly, at some point, a Propel and a TCR will come together, have a baby, and there'll be a new bike, which in theory will just be the best of both worlds. But if we focus on the bike that has just been launched, obviously the TCR has always been about, you know, being lightweight and being stiff. Now, to put some kind of comparative numbers on that, one of the key bikes that you can compare against the TCR would maybe be an S-Works Athos. So if we look at a full build, a S-Works Athos with Dura-Ace will weigh 6.23 kilos. And the TCR comes in at 6.4. So still incredibly light, UCI illegal, but there is still just a little bit of a difference there.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said here, more than anything, for carbon fibre technology. The material science has just improved so much that now a bike manufacturer can create a bike that is 6.4 kilos, stiffer than the previous bike. They can shave all that weight off the frame set and incorporate some aero features as well. There's definitely sort of a culmination of knowledge coming together here that is why we're seeing a lot of very similar bikes in the last sort of 12 months. And I think it's probably a trend that will continue, isn't it?
Yeah, true. I think the one special thing about Giant, though, is that they do own their own factories in Taiwan. And they actually changed up how they process carbon fibre. So they used to laser cut all of the pieces, but now they do this cold blade cutting technology, which means that essentially the carbon fibre isn't exposed to kind of excess heat. But because Giant own those factories, they have a lot of control over the manufacturing process. And that then does allow them to kind of really push the boundaries in terms of what they are capable of doing. And as we all know, Giants do tend to be quite good value for money in comparison. And actually, let's touch on price. The bike that we've got behind us is the most expensive and will cost you either $12,500 or just shy of £12,000. But since it is Giant, there are some good value options out there, and prices start from either $3,200 or £2,699, and that's for a mechanical 105 12-speed build. So I think there's a really nice range there.
For sure, there's a range there for everyone, isn't there? Also, some new Cadex wheels.
Yeah, exactly. So this bike here is fitted with the Cadex Max 40s. Now, not a cheap wheel set. I mean, if you're going to buy them aftermarket, they would cost you about £3,500. So quite a lot of money. They do look very cool though, but we also then have to think about how they're constructed, because the hub flange is also integral to the spokes as well. So they are very light, they're in that 1200 gram region, so super light, super stiff, and I imagine that they're going to feel amazing, but you're really not going to snap a spoke.
Yeah, for sure. It definitely wouldn't be cheap. But yeah, as we spoke to Stefan, who has already ridden the bike, and he said that the wheels really make the bike. He said the frame feels great, obviously, it's really light, but yeah, the pièce de résistance, if you like, was really that wheel set. But yeah, as we mentioned there, I'm sure they are strong, but God, I'd be careful.
Yeah, absolutely. Let us know though, what do you think of this new TCR? Is it something that you would like to ride?